The front door of my house swung open and immediately slammed shut with a resounding BAM, reverberating through every corner of my rather spacious home. "Mom! Are you here, Mom?" Lance? Something wasn't right, very wrong in fact. I sensed it in the way he called out to me. A mother knows the nuances of her only child's voice. When a man calls out to his mother with such desperation, there's only one reason for it. It was the cry of despair, a final plea to avoid the inevitable. When a man calls out to his mother, it's a sign that he has lost all hope of surviving whatever ordeal he faces. I rushed into the living room and found my son standing in the foyer, his appearance matching the desperation in his voice. His shoulders drooped as if burdened by an invisible weight. His eyes seemed sunken and tears streamed down his face. He appeared as if he was on the brink of death. "Lance, what's the matter?" "Mom," he whispered, barely audible this time. We drew closer together. As we embraced, I held him tightly, reminiscent of when he was younger. Lance towered over me now, so he had to stoop down to return the embrace. No matter how old a son becomes, he will always need his mother. "Darling, what's the matter?" I asked again. His cheek rested on the top of my head as he held me tighter. "She's gone, Mom. Lily's gone." Those words struck me like a blow. Panic surged within me. Lily, my daughter-in-law, meant as much to me as Lance himself. I cherished her as deeply as if she were my biological daughter. Oh God. What happened to Lily? Gently nudging him to create some distance, I lifted my son's chin so that our eyes met. In a calm yet tense tone, I urged, "Lance, my son, please talk to me. I need to understand what's happening. Is Lily all right?" His expression shifted then. Almost immediately, that sorrowful, defeated look transformed into something else. His eyes turned cold. A cynical, angry smirk twisted his lips. He looked malevolent. With a cutting sarcasm, he replied to my question, "Lily's doing great, Mom. No need to fret about her. She's just living her best life with Randall." "Pardon?" Seeing my confusion, he burst into laughter. It wasn't jovial. It was more of a desperate laugh, as if trying to stave off tears. "Oh, she didn't fill you in?" he quipped rhetorically. "Yeah, Lily, your surrogate daughter, has been cheating on me." He paused to let that sink in. I admit, part of me felt relief. After envisioning Lily in horrific accidents, it was a relief to know she was physically unharmed. But then a second wave of realization hit me. The implications of this revelation. How it affected my son. How it affected the entire family. The betrayal. In some ways, this was far worse. "What?" "Oh, you bet!" he exclaimed, clapping his hands theatrically at my shocked expression. With a darkly humorous tone, he added, "Lily's been in a full-blown affair for 6 whole months." He chuckled again as he walked away, presumably toward the kitchen to pour himself a stiff drink. I trailed after him, my steps sluggish as if wading through mud. Upon entering the kitchen, I found my assumption confirmed. He had already helped himself to some whiskey, bypassing the glass entirely and taking swigs straight from the bottle. Silently, I took the bottle from his grasp. Retrieving 2 glasses from the cabinet, I poured a measure into each and slid one across the counter to him. He raised his glass, downed the whiskey in a single gulp, and gestured for more like a seasoned bar patron. Refilling his glass, I seized the opportunity to voice one of the burning questions in my mind. "Who's Randall?" After downing the second glass as swiftly as the first, he bitterly replied, "Randall is the man my beloved wife has been having an affair with." I winced at his coarse language. While not prudish myself, and well aware that my son's vocabulary might not always be prim and proper in private, I could never grow accustomed to hearing him swear, particularly when discussing his wife. He grabbed me, looking somewhat offended. "I'm sorry, Mom. Should I have said something less harsh?" I could only roll my eyes at my son, realizing that his words were caused by pain. However, I refrained from pouring him more. "I thought he was her partner in an affair," I said, giving the correct answer. "But I mean, who was he to her before the affair? A colleague? A friend? A stranger from the internet?" His expression turned sad again. He shrugged his shoulders dejectedly and asked, "Does it even matter?" After thinking about it, I agreed. "No, I suppose not." This time I was the one who took a sip, feeling uncomfortable with the silence that hung between our words. After a pause, I asked, "Does she love him?" He looked away from me, as if he didn't want me to see a tear that rolled from the corner of his eye and rolled down his cheek. With a slight nod, he confirmed my question. There was another silence. I felt that Lance wanted another drink, but I was afraid that he might get drunk. Such moments require clarity of mind. Alcohol can numb the pain for a moment, but in the long run, it only allows the drinker to cause even more harm. I knew this firsthand because I was in a similar predicament many years ago. "Tell me everything," I asked him. Randall was a colleague of hers, pretty standard. They were assigned to the same project about 2 years ago. He recalled that time frame because it coincided with her week-long trip out of town. She never brought up Randall, which struck Lance as odd since he wasn't even aware of Randall's existence. He just had a sense that something wasn't quite right with her when she returned. Nothing significant, just a bit more reflective. Nothing intimate occurred during that trip. They simply spent time together, like friends. No harm done. Exactly. It doesn't seem that intimacy is the only thing that poses a threat to marriage. Over the course of the following 18 months, their bond deepened. Initially, they remained merely colleagues, nothing beyond work acquaintances. However, the seeds of something more were planted, nurtured daily. Gradually, their ease with each other and familiarity blurred professional boundaries. What were once team-building lunch breaks transitioned into private meals for two. Casual drinks with co-workers evolved into evenings spent together at a bar, seeking relaxation. Lance remained oblivious. Unaware of his wife's gradual drift towards another man, their marriage encountered the typical hurdles that many do. Intimacy waned, communication faltered, and time for each other diminished. Yet even amidst these challenges, they avoided confrontation, merely coexisting like many busy spouses. Lance claimed there were no warning signs, but I knew that wasn't true. Men often fail to perceive the obvious signals of an unhappy wife until it's too late. Despite this, I couldn't entirely fault him. She should have expressed her discontent if she wasn't happy with my son. What kind of person does this to a spouse they profess to love? Witnessing Lance's anguish tainted my affection for Lily. As he recounted his story, I watched fragments of his heart crumble before me. The first inkling of trouble came when he stumbled upon her in tears. Initially assuming it was work-related distress, he soon realized it was the opposite. A moment of joy at work, though it brought about the worst possible outcome. It was the moment she and Randall shared their first kiss, a kiss filled with passion and doubt, perfect, yet profoundly wrong. 6 months ago marks the point when the affair began, according to Lance's calculation. However, I had a different perspective. The affair truly commenced 2 years back during that business trip. That's when the trajectory towards this conclusion was set. It was the concealed attraction they both denied, yet secretly harbored, wondering about each other's nakedness. That initial kiss merely represented the nascent stage of their entanglement. The intimate aspect, which is often the main thing for most men, persisted for 5 of those 6 months. It was during this time that the chasm between them widened to monumental proportions. Arguments ensued, beds turned cold, nights became solitary, an insurmountable impasse loomed. Then, today happened. He returned home to find her packing. "We've drifted apart. Our dynamics have shifted. The connection has been absent for a while, hasn't it?" That was her rationale. 6 years of marriage dissolved within a single day. She painted it as though she were doing him a favor. It seemed unfair to bind him to a falsehood. He deserved the freedom to discover someone who could love him unreservedly. He was such an exceptional individual that confining him to this loveless union would be a disservice. Blah, 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 she's such a saint, that fucking daughter-in-law of mine. So, what are you gonna do? I asked as his words trailed off. He shrugged, then his shoulders slumped. I don't know. Recalling the events leading up to today had exhausted him. He looked as though he'd been battling all day. All I could offer was another loving hug. There's no more helpless feeling than seeing your child in pain. I couldn't free him from this. No amount of money or love from me could help. He was truly alone in this. I resented Lily for it. As much as I loved her, I hated her. Lance didn't deserve this. How could she do this to a man she claimed to love? Lily is dead to me, I whispered to him during our embrace, meaning every word. I wanted my son to know I was on his side. I wanted him to understand that, as much as I loved Lily, I would completely disavow any feelings for her if I had to choose between them. Lance slipped away from my arms and paced the kitchen slowly. He ran both hands through his hair and let out a long breath. Finally, he returned to lean against the counter. Just as I was dwelling on Lily's deceitfulness and her despicable nature, I heard Lance chuckle bitterly to himself. Then, words escaped his lips that cut me to the core. This must have been what Dad felt like. Initially, the words didn't register. They carried an angry and hateful tone, so much so that I failed to realize they were directed at me. What did you just say? He turned to face me, and for the first time in decades, my son glared at me with anger. When you cheated on Dad and left him for Bill, he didn't get a chance to finish that sentence because my hand acted on its own accord. A loud smack reverberated through the kitchen. How could he even utter such a vile thing? He was so young when it happened. He had no understanding of what transpired between his father and me. Since my marriage to Thomas ended, all he's known is Bill. Thomas tried to play his fatherly role in Lance's life initially, but I never demanded anything from him when I left. I set him free completely. He got the house, he got the car, he didn't have to pay me any alimony or child support. The only thing I asked of him was to let me live my life. In the end, he granted me that wish. He vanished, leaving me and Lance to live happily with Bill. As much as it pained him, he did me that favor. In return, I did the same for him. I believed it was the most optimal approach, the most effective way to provide each of us with a fresh start. Lance, Bill, and I had the chance to form a new family unit. Thomas could move forward without any financial entanglements from his past life. Though it was painful initially, I thought a clean break would facilitate better healing than enduring ongoing drama with baby daddies and ex-husbands. Bill was financially secure, owning a house, leaving no need for contention with Thomas. In hindsight, my decision seemed justified. Lance flourished, attending a prestigious private school and then one of the top colleges without accruing student debt. He smoothly transitioned into a successful career, now enjoying a prosperous life. Despite Thomas being hardworking, he couldn't offer Lance the same opportunities. It appeared to be the best resolution to a chaotic situation. At least that was my belief. However, it seems my son had a different perspective. After our exchange, we stood in silence, locking gazes. I anticipated an apology or remorse from him, but instead, he stared back at me with hostility, as though I had wronged him. Finally, I questioned, "Why would you say that to me?" He sighed. "Because, Mom." "Because what?" With a groan, he pushed away from the counter, pacing the room. Each step reverberated in the silence between us. His tone shifted from anger to curiosity as he inquired, "What time is Bill coming home tonight?" I suppressed the urge to demand the apology I felt owed, instead responding calmly, "I'm not sure. You know Bill often works late." He absorbed this information, then asked almost deliberately, "Do you ever wonder?" Undoubtedly, this had been a source of tension between Bill and me for a while. We had been disagreeing over his late nights, his increasing emotional distance, and his lack of affection. I wasn't sure if Lance was aware of this, which made me wonder why he even brought it up. I understood his implication, and the idea repulsed me to the core. "No, I don't," I replied swiftly, feeling disgusted by the suggestion. "Bill loves me. He wouldn't do that." "Like you loved Dad?" Lance's words cut through me with icy accusation, confirming his attack on me. His anger, previously directed at his wife, was now aimed at me. "Now listen to me," I began, closing the gap between us. I locked eyes with him, speaking sternly. "I'm not your wife. I'm your mother. Keep your anger directed where it belongs, and don't take it out on me." I saw him relent slightly at my words. This exchange triggered a sense of déjà vu within me. Not so much the subject matter, but the way he looked at me as I reprimanded him. It reminded me of when he used to come home late in high school, smelling of beer and marijuana. Once more, my son was by my side. The sorrowful expression returned to his face, causing me immense pain anew. Just as I was on the verge of reaching out to comfort him, he posed a question. "Do you ever regret what you did to Dad?" Though his tone lacked anger, the weight of his inquiry still stung. He wasn't merely referring to Thomas and my actions from years ago. He was questioning his own existence. Will Lily ever rue her decisions? Will she one day reflect on this moment with remorse? Or will she find everlasting contentment? Lance bore a striking resemblance to his father, a resemblance that sometimes felt eerie. And this resemblance was my burden, as gazing upon Lance now felt like revisiting the past. Nearly 2 decades ago, I stood in a kitchen with Thomas. It was much smaller compared to the one I stood in now. Thomas would never attain the success of Bill. Our home was modest, our life constrained. Bill epitomized the rags to riches story. He built the company where I served as his secretary from scratch. He was daring, intelligent, self-assured, a man who pursued his ambitions with unwavering determination, and he effortlessly swept me off my feet. Hypocrisy, thy name is Tina. Yes, I once was Lily. Decades ago, I stood before my then-husband, espousing the same excuses that she now fed to my son. That was different, I rationalized to myself. Thomas and I were on divergent paths. We had drifted apart long before. Our separation was inevitable. But was it really? I was so certain then. I genuinely believed it when I assured him that he was a wonderful man who would bring immense happiness to another woman. He truly was better off releasing me and finding her, the one who would cherish him as he deserved. But that woman wasn't me. Not anymore. Because now, I loved Bill. Now that I think about it, he bore an uncanny resemblance to how my poor Lance appeared at that moment. It was as if his entire world had crumbled beneath him, as if he had tapped into my innermost thoughts and comprehended them, Lance interjected. Though he spoke softly, his words rang crystal clear. "People often say you marry someone like your mother, but I never imagined—" He turned away abruptly. It seemed he couldn't bear to look at me any longer, as though my presence repulsed him. "Lance," I uttered, reaching out for him. My heart shattered when he brushed me away. "I need to leave," he muttered, striding away. I pursued him, calling out his name, yet he disregarded me, eager to distance himself. A realization dawned on him, as his own suffering merged with the echoes of his father's past anguish. Walking in the same painful footsteps as his father stirred within him a compassion that overshadowed his affection for me. "Lance, please, where are you going?" He had reached my doorstep by now, on the verge of leaving, when my plea halted him in his tracks. With one foot inside and the other yearning to flee, he paused, contemplating. Finally, he met my gaze and uttered, I need to confide in the only person who truly understands. His father. He sought solace in Thomas. I sighed despondently. But nobody knows where he is. I do, he revealed, a flicker of genuine smile crossing his face for the first time that evening. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet authentic. I've known for about a year now. What? Yeah, he admitted with a shrug. I found him. Well, he found me, actually, but since then we've been talking. I was torn between two fears, the realization that he'd been conversing with Thomas for a year, and the fact that he kept it from me. What about? I inquired cautiously, struggling to keep my composure. His response didn't come in words. Instead, there was a glance, laden with unspoken meaning. Then, he vanished. The resounding slam of the front door echoed through the house, leaving me feeling more isolated than ever before. Despite everything, I'd always be his mother. Nothing could alter that bond, not even Thomas. While it might be an exaggeration to claim I'd lost his affection, despite his current outpouring of misplaced anger, I realized he'd never see me in quite the same light again. In my son's eyes, I was no longer untouchable. It's a somber moment when our children come to understand that we're just as flawed as anyone else. The next morning, I woke up in my bed, still fully clothed from the night before, curled up in a fetal position. My cell phone, showing only a 15% charge, lay beside me. Throughout the previous night, I had spent hours desperately making calls. Lance didn't pick up. Neither did Bill. I even dialed my ex-husband, Thomas, but once again, silence greeted me. None of the important men in my life seemed interested in talking to me. Even before I looked in the bathroom mirror, I could sense the state of my drained, tear-stained face. I was a sorry sight. There was a time when two men were vying for my love, but now I couldn't even reach my husband on the phone. With a heavy heart, I splashed water on my face before heading downstairs to brew a pot of coffee. It wasn't lost on me that Bill hadn't slept in our bed. Despite searching our enormous house, his absence lingered in every room. He hadn't returned home at all the previous night. This had become a more frequent occurrence lately. An hour later, the front door swung open, and I dashed into the living room to find my husband standing in the foyer. "Bill," I breathed, relief flooding my voice. In an instant, my anger dissipated. I needed him, and he was here. I craved the comfort of his embrace, the assurance of his love. With the turmoil of the past 12 hours reflecting in my soul, I longed to see the gaze of affection. Throwing myself into his arms, I clung to him, burying my face against his chest. But his arms didn't close around me. "Honey, please. I need a hug." I anticipated his embrace, but his arms hung limply at his sides. Perplexed, I pulled back to look at him. "Darling?" He sighed heavily, as if regretting his presence in the room with me. It felt like circumstance had forced him into this unfortunate situation. My heart sank. I recognized that look all too well. It was the same look I had seen nearly 2 decades ago. "Tina," he began, his voice softening as he said my name. "No, please, no." Tears welled in my eyes. "Bill?" I choked out, almost begging. "Honey, please, just hold me." "Tina, we need to talk."